Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel, and more specifically, welcome to the second episode of the 4 to Follow series, a series where me and Andrew look at some of the yards across the UK and Ireland and pinpoint some exciting superstars in waiting to get excited about for the upcoming National Hunt season. I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait. Thank you so much for all of the support on the previous video. If you do enjoy this video, hit that like button. It massively helps the channel and massively helps me and Andrew as well, and we're on our way to 12,000 subscribers. A big thank you for that. We're not too far away, so if you're not subscribed already, please do. The first trainer I'm going to talk about is Henry de Bromhead, and what a year he had. He's definitely going to have plenty of exciting horses going into the upcoming season that we must know about. I've selected 4 that I think should be in your trackers. The first one is a well handicapped horse, and it's Petit Bonhomme, rated 126 over hurdles. He was 6 lengths clear at the last in his point-to-point before making a mistake and taking the wrong course. He was disqualified that day, but he would have been an impressive point-to-point winner. He's 0 from 3 in 3 starts for Henry de Bromhead, and his second start he was 2 lengths second to Cape Gentleman at Punchestown, albeit the winner won very cosily that day, but now he's rated 142, and the third that day is now rated 126. On his third start, he was half a length behind You Raise Me Up, travelled best of all, and was probably just one paced when was asked the question. You Raise Me Up's now rated 136, and the third that day is rated 127. So already we're trying to think Petit Bonhomme is probably well handicapped off 126, no matter what trip and what race he runs in. But I do think the making of this horse will be a trip. I think once he goes over 3 miles, he's been racing over 2 and 2.5. Once he goes over 3, I think that's when he will improve and he will be a better horse than 126. The potential rocket is Journey With Me. You've probably heard of him. He won a Ballon-esque point-to-point by 12 lengths in November 2020. He then won that Gowran bumper springboard for Tellus Moore, York Hill, Minella Melody, Bob Olinger in 2020. A 13-length winner of the race as well, very impressive. He made all in bottomless ground, very, very easy, and Patrick Mullins rode the horse like he couldn't be beat, and he didn't. The form at the moment I don't think is anything special. The third has come out and finished semi-close in 2 bumpers since, and the second we've not seen since. But obviously, because Bob Olinger won the race last year and he has the same connections, the same owner, the same trainer, the comparisons were made straight away. I think that's probably slightly premature. I watched back that bumper and Bob Olinger seemed to quicken against some useful horses in behind, whether Journey With Me just seemed to sustain his gallop and the rest faded away. That's obviously not a bad thing, and it means that he's untapped. We do not know the bottom of Journey With Me. He's a young horse. He's got a very, very bright future, and he probably is the most exciting horse at Henry de Bromhead's yard. But that being said, I don't think you should have your hopes thinking that he is Bob Olinger. He's a very exciting horse for the upcoming season for Henry de Bromhead. I've got 2 horses to follow, one being Gilly Billy, a big, beautiful grey, £310,000 purchase. He was one of the 5 that moved from Cheveley Park Stud from Gordon Elliott to Henry de Bromhead, the likes of Envoi Allen, Quilixios, Ballyadam, Malone Road. He won a Tinahely point-to-point by 4 lengths to Captain Quint, who's since been bought for £110,000, and the race was won from 2 flights out. It was very easy, and the race that day was 14 seconds faster than the average on the day, so above average, very impressive, and a point-to-pointer to note, hence the big price tag. And he was from the same nursery as the big Getaway and Brave Man's Game, so he comes from good stock as well. I think Gilly Billy is definitely one to note. And the other one to follow is Ballyboe Native. Won a Tipperary bumper by 13 lengths for trainer Ian John McCarthy. Cod was booked to ride, a big indication of a horse's ability, especially in a bumper, and he was held up smooth headway and quickened without much effort at all. Very, very impressive. And he's since moved to Henry de Bromhead's for £195,000. I'm not 100% sure on the owner, but Ballyboe Native could rank quite highly in his novice hurdlers or bumper horses for the upcoming National Hunt season.
The first trainer to follow that I have for episode 2 of this series is Dermot McLoughlin, who's an up-and-coming trainer in Ireland and obviously had his big day in the sun with Freewheelin' Dylan winning the Irish Grand National this year. However, his well-handicapped horse for me is the Great White, who's a lovely big grey horse who's actually been progressive over hurdles and has started his chasing career. He's currently got a mark of 106 over hurdles, and I would say his opening mark over handicaps over fences will be something quite similar. He's ran in a few beginners chases thus far. He looks a scopy horse and he's also very young, so you'd like to hope there's improvement to come, and certainly off that mark in the low hundreds he certainly should be winning handicaps very soon. The star in this yard is quite obviously Santa Rosa, and it's been such a shame that we haven't got to see as much of Santa Rosa as you'd have liked, considering she won a Grade 2 bumper just a couple of years ago at the Dublin Racing Festival. She was only seen once last year when polishing a maiden hurdle field at Naas really impressively, and if she was able to back that up in any sort of regard this year, she'll be becoming a Grade 3, maybe even a Grade 2 or Grade 1 mare in those sort of mares hurdle races. Let's hope that she can keep sound during this time and hopefully have a decent season. The ones to follow mainly being Opposites Attract, who's a horse that's going to run in an awful lot of these staying handicap chases. He's yet to win a race over fences, which is maybe a small bit of a concern, but as a result he has a little bit of a Run Wild Fred persona about him going in as a second season novice. He should be able to pick up a beginner's chase in time before running in the likes of the Troy Town, Thyestes and potentially Irish National again. He ran in the Irish National this year and ran with credit, but also I think he was quite inexperienced for the job, and potentially with another year on his back could well be a bigger and better proposition. The other one to follow is a horse called Mr. Josie Wales, who has only run 2 times over hurdles for this stable, second behind Noble Yates of Emmet Mullins, who's a really good horse, I believe, over 3 miles. He then went down to Cork and won under Danny Hand off a prohibitive price of 4 to 6, but he did it really nicely that day, and the way that Danny Hand was patting him down the back after 100 yards to go would indicate that he thought this was potentially the best horse that he sat on. He looks to be a really nice type, and again another steadily progressive horse that should be seen to better effect over fences this year. So Dermot McLoughlin, he's the type of trainer I think might go under the radar and could well have a very good year this year.
The next trainer I'm going to talk about makes his return on the 9th, and that is Gordon Elliott. It's a very tricky situation, a very sensitive subject for many, but he will be training some of the most high-profile horses in training. Therefore, I think that he is worth a mention in this series. The well-handicapped horse from the yard, you think I'm going crazy, is Grand Parody. Why do you think I'm going crazy? Because he doesn't have a handicap mark. He's not necessarily well-handicapped. I just think that he's an improver going under the radar. He was a winner of the Fairyhouse Bumper, no ordinary bumper, Outlander, Value at Risk, Identity Thief, Get a Bird, Downtown Getaway, On Violin, and Eric Bloodaxe have won the race in the past. Strong history to that race, and I thought it was an absolute cert on his hurdling debut. Those close to me would know that, and he was beaten 4th at Naas. I couldn't get my head around it at all. A few weeks later, he went and bolted up at Fairyhouse in a 2-mile maiden hurdle, and then he stepped up in trip to 2 miles and 5 furlongs for the Michael Purcell Memorial Novices Hurdle, a Grade 3 contest at Thurles, late February, and hacked it by 15 lengths. I knew then he was a very good horse. I just think this horse is a Grade 1 novice chaser in the making. I'm going to go for the Fairyhouse 2.5 mile Grade 1 novices chase. I think it's the Underwriting Exchange Gold Cup novice chase. That's what it's called this year. April, this horse, have it in your mind. I think this horse could win that race. A potential rocket from the yard, Saint Felician, a horse that you may not have heard of, won an all-toy 4-year-old conditions race on his sole start, won it by 18 lengths, super impressive, and he's been brought privately since by Rob Core, the owners of Bob Olinger, Pencil Full of Lead, Journey with Me, etc. And the vibes from the yard they're very happy with him, and he probably will rank very highly amongst their young horses this season. He can't run at a bumper because he did win a hurdle race over in France, but he can go novice hurdling over here. He's very exciting, a horse that I think people are particularly excited about at Gordon Elliott's yard, and one that should be in your notebook for the upcoming National Hunt season. The first one to follow is American Mike. He won a Cork point-to-point by 20 lengths. 20 lengths, since sold for £195,000 to Gordon Elliott, and will run in the Bective stud colours, those worn by the bosses Oscar Zanna here, and they like him a lot. I know that for a fact. I think we'll probably see him in a bumper, and he's a young horse to keep an eye out on this season, American Mike. Another one to follow is Gars de Sceaux from the point-to-point fields. JP, I think, also bought the second in his point-to-point, Magic Tricks, rated 136 at the moment. He was second on debut to hook up over 2 miles. He does not have the toe for 2 miles. The writing was on the wall very early on, and I think they've always seen him as a staying chaser in the making. He was stepped up to 2.5 miles and ground out a victory in a Navan maiden hurdle, but we didn't see the best of him until he stepped up to 2 miles 7 when winning a Navan novice hurdle, and I do think that they kept him away from the spring festivals. He's an out-and-out stayer. He's going novice chasing. That's a big point. He's going novice chasing, and I wouldn't put you off having a little nibble on him at 40-1 available for the National Hunt Chase at Cheltenham in March. That's Gars de Sceaux in the JP colours. I think he's got a very bright future over staying trips.
The next trainer for myself is Emmet Mullins, and starting off with his well-handicapped horse, which I believe to be Cape Gentleman, who ran such a massive race in the Galway Hurdle when third behind Saldier off a mark of 140. He's been raised £2 for that effort and now is off a mark of 142, but watch out for this horse whether he runs in handicap hurdles in Ireland or England, or potentially goes over fences this year. He's certainly a horse to keep the right side of and will be winning plenty of races. He obviously won that Dovecote Novices Hurdle at Kempton earlier this year, so he has the ability to mix it in with grade 2, grade 3 animals, and off a mark of 142 should be dangerous, and one to potentially keep the right side of if they do decide to go over to England for a few starts. The potential star is a horse I actually mentioned during my Dermot McLoughlin piece, and that's Noble Yates. I think this could be a really, really good horse for the owner, Paul Byrne, who used to own the Shunter obviously last year, and he's got another nice type on his hands here. This horse was beaten at Limerick over Christmas, and I think Patrick Mullins couldn't believe he got beat on him before winning next time out by around 17 lengths. They then quickly supplemented him for the Grade 2 bumper at the Dublin Racing Festival, where he didn't run his race and came 6th behind Kilcruit, and let's be clear about it for Gavin Cromwell. He just didn't seem to fire that day despite being well backed. They quickly put him over hurdles, which was an interesting thing to do because he only ran the once over hurdles, winning to Mr. Josie Wales by 12 lengths, heavily eased down at a very prohibitive price. It means that obviously he has to take on older horses and potentially venture into handicap company over hurdles this year, or potentially go down the beginner's chase route. And given that he was entered for a beginner's chase at Galway just last week before being a late non-runner, would indicate that that's the route they're going to go down. If this horse can take to jumping fences the way he did jumping hurdles, he could be a really smart prospect over middle to staying distances. The two to follow for Emmet Mullins both come in the me colours, starting off with Russian Diamond, who's a horse that will come good at some stage despite his frailties with his jumping. He's only ran a couple of times over fences and his jumping has left a fair bit to be desired, including coming down when in the lead in a beginner's chase at the Galway Festival. Obviously the me's do target Galway, as does Emmet Mullins, so you'd have thought he was primed to go and win that day. He is a very good horse, and when you look back to some of his hurdle form, he could be a horse that could translate into a 130, 140 plus performer if he was to put it all together. Those falls aren't helping him though, and he obviously hasn't been the soundest to train, so he's one to just keep the right side of when you can. Also, another horse that hasn't been maybe the greatest jumper in the world but has tons of ability is 010, who's had a few runs on the flat this year. He won comfortably in a mile 4 flat maiden to Ciel d'Afrique at the Galway Festival, with that form being well boosted, before finishing second at Tramore in a ride that probably Shamie Heffernan would want back. Heffernan noted that the horse probably didn't handle Tramore, which is a fair point considering I think he's an all-out galloper, but he's also shown some really good form over hurdles and over fences. Mostly over hurdles, where he won the auction hurdle at Ferryhouse a few years ago, and is also a grade 3 winner as a novice chaser at Thurles, despite his jumping being less than convincing. If he can rectify that jumping, he certainly has a very good chance of competing in some of the high level handicap chases, but I'd be an awful lot more helped, and I think he'd be much better off suited by going back over hurdles and potentially competing in 2 mile 4 open hurdles this year, and see how far up the ladder he can go. So my thoughts are that he's a genuine Grade 1 horse, but we just haven't seen it quite yet. And at the age of 8, this is the time that he's going to have to put it together. So there's 4 from the Emmet Mullins stable, who again are really rapidly going forward. And obviously Emmet Mullins has become such a good target trainer that it would be remiss to not respect all of his horses when they're going for those big races.
The third trainer I'm going to talk about is Olly Murphy, a trainer close to home to me in Stratford-upon-Avon, and I think his well-handicapped horse is Coppolas, rated 140 over hurdles. He's part-owned by his dad, Aidan Murphy, a super agent in the bloodstock world. It took him 3 runs to get off the mark before getting off the mark in a market race and maiden hurdle. He won off 117 at Taunton on his next start, and I'm happy to concede that he would have beaten Roland Ward. I did like Roland Ward at Aintree, but Coppolas was travelling all over him that day before falling at the last. I think he would have beaten him, so he probably deserves that Aintree win, but he instead went to the Swinton Hurdle at Haydock in May and won by 8.5 lengths when rated 126. Obviously gone up £14 since then. I think the Welsh Champion Hurdle is next in October, and Ollie is talking about potentially graded races. Early on, you've got the Fighting Fifth, the Grade 1 up at Newcastle. I think if this horse was to win the Welsh Champion Hurdle, I think Ollie will expect him to run well. He could go on to graded races. That's why I'm thinking 140 might be quite lenient if Ollie is thinking those big races down the line for Coppolas. The potential rocket in Ollie's stable is Go Dante, bought for €170,000 by Barbara Hester, the same owner as Brewing Up a Storm, and he was one of the most impressive bumper winners I saw last season. He won by 7.5 lengths at Wincanton. He was going to go to the Aintree bumper, but Ollie pulled him out, I think due to the quickness of the ground and just wanting to look after him long term. I think that he's probably one of the most exciting horses that Ollie's ever had, and he's been so impressive, I think, in work at home. Ollie absolutely loves him. He's probably that one horse in the yard that could reach the highest height. So Go Dante for Olly Murphy would be the potential rocket. My first horse to follow in Olly Murphy's yard is Dr. Ken, who ran in the colours of the Whateleys, the same ones as Thomas Darby. That good old saying, anything over a hurdle is just a bonus. That being said, he's clearly got plenty of ability and will be winning novice hurdles this season. And my final one to follow from Ollie's is Duke of Rockingham. We've seen him once, and like Dr. Ken, owned by the Whateleys, was bought for €130,000 purchase, so he's got a big price tag, and his only start was 7th behind Petrosian, a useful youngster for Paul Nicholls in a bumper at Newbury. Ollie thought a fair amount of this horse going into that, and when you watch the race back, visually, your eye couldn't help but be drawn to him. He was travelling very well for the most part of the race, probably second best to Petrosian, before blowing up in the straight when being asked the question. I think he can be forgiven for that run, and that wasn't his true showing. I think he's got a big future. Be on the right side of Duke of Rockingham this season.
The next trainer on the list for me is Barry Connell. Barry Connell has obviously made the transition between being a renowned amateur rider to an owner, and now owns his own horses to train. The well-handicapped horse from his stable, I believe, is one of the best handicapped horses in Ireland, and it's a horse called Big King, who's running off a mark of 121 at the moment. Having won a handicap hurdle early in the year, he came second to Dysart Diamond on Stephen's Day at Leopardstown, when found himself far too far back and ended up staying on very gallantly. He's won a few decent races since then, including finishing down the field behind Shan Rowe at Fairyhouse at their Easter meeting over 2 Mile 4. I didn't think he quite stayed that day, and potentially a step back down in trip should suit. Off a mark of 121, you'd have to think he'll be in the winner's enclosure very soon. The star from that stable is one of my personal favourites, and it's a horse called Enniskerry, who's done really well this summer, ending up culminating in a very close second behind MC Muldoon at Galway. He'd won a few novice hurdles prior to that, and obviously had some very good form in bumpers tied in with Let's Be Clear About It last year. Be interesting to see just how he's campaigned, whether they'll give him a break and potentially target him at some of those spring festivals. But he could well be a well-handicapped horse off his current rating in the 130s, but also could well rank higher over that and potentially push towards listed or Grade 3 honours. Two to follow from the Barry Connell stable starts off with Snake Oil, who's a horse we haven't seen for an awful long time. He finished down the field on his only start for Keith Clark, but then ended up winning a bumper when very well backed on his stable debut for Barry Connell. He then went on to finish third behind Wide Receiver in a maiden hurdle at Leopardstown on Stephen's Day, and there was some good horses in around him there, the likes of MC Muldoon, Hallowed Star, and of course Wide Receiver was in front of him alongside Demafon. These are good horses to be tied in with, and even though we haven't seen him since, that RPR in the mid 120s is very fair and would indicate that he's going to win plenty of races in time. So Snake Oil is certainly one to keep the right side of when he returns. And the other one to keep the right side of is recent scorer The Lady in Red, who was a recent recruit for Barry Connell and owned by Rory Connell, and won at Galway only this Monday. She did very nicely that day, and having finished second in a maiden hurdle behind the really good Big Bad and Beautiful of Denise Foster's, she certainly will look to be scaling the heights when going over hurdles again for this stable. I thought it was a canny switching this horse back from hurdles to win her bumper, which will have helped the horse mentality wise, and hopefully will go forward to now win plenty of races over hurdles.
The final trainer I'm going to talk about is my beloved Paul Nicholls, the champion trainer. He's going to have plenty of exciting horses going into this season, and some that should be in your tracker. The well-handicapped horse from the yard that I think is Peso Doble, who's rated 129 over hurdles. He came off the flat, which is unusual for a Paul Nicholls horse. He usually sources his horse from the point-to-point fields, but mainly France. And he was chucked in as Nicholls' only runner in the Grade 2 Adonis when third, 11 lengths beaten by Tritonic, a very good horse of Alan King's. He didn't travel particularly well that day, but stayed on all the way to the line, a typical Paul Nicholls horse. He then went back to Kempton after a 65-day break, over the same trip 2 miles, and he made all under Bryony Frost. He's only 4. I think he'll improve for a step up and trip, and he's definitely a horse on the up. 129 is definitely at the lower end of this horse's ability. He's going to be one that's going to be racking up wins throughout the season. Peso Doble. The potential rocket in the yard, probably another obvious one, a bit like Journey with Me, Nappers Hill. He won the Aintree bumper, he won a Chepstow bumper, he won a listed bumper at Ascot, then won the Aintree bumper. Obviously these horses have got massive futures. Many people are plenty excited about them, but the form ties closely with another Nicholls horse called Stage Star. 2 horses to note going novice hurdling this year. I do think Nappers Hill could be a staying chaser in the making. I'm not sure that he's going to be a Grade 1 novice hurdler, maybe especially not at the likes of a Cheltenham Festival, but that's not the be all or end all, and Nappers Hill is definitely a very exciting horse from the Nicholls yard for the upcoming season. My first one to follow is a horse that I hope you don't know about, and it's Halo Desobo, a big beautiful grey trained by Nicolas Devilder over in France. He won a 4-year-old's Colts and Gelding hurdler Auteuil, since gone to Nicholls, and I get the impression that they like him a heck of a lot. A very good record with French recruits, as Paul Nicholls have, and he's one of the new recruits that I think could rank pretty highly amongst the Paul Nicholls runners. And another one to follow is Scatman, who won a Dronhane point-to-point in 2019, beating Barbados Bucks and Lieutenant Rocco, 2 horses that we know plenty about. Scatman was bought for 170,000 and Barbados Bucks 210,000 euros. So obviously that form was pretty good. He ran in an Ascot bumper a couple of years ago behind Soaring Glory when he was second string to Brave Man's Game. We didn't see him for 466 days. I'm not 100% sure why, but he reappeared at Musselburgh in March when beating Presenting and Counting, who's now rated 147 over fences. So I think they might go chasing with him, but Scatman is a horse that is going to rank pretty highly at Paul Nicholls' yard this year. Very exciting, lightly raced 6-year-old. Make sure he's in your tracker.
And the final trainer for this video from my end is Nicky Richards, starting off with his well-handicapped horse, which I think is Marone, owned by Trevor Hemmings, who's off a mark of 139. He won a novice chase at Wetherby at the back end of last year before finishing 9th at Ayr, and that was probably a little bit of disappointing effort. But he'd had a hard season up until then, finishing second in a couple of good handicap chases at Haydock over 2.5 miles, and I certainly think there's a lot of untapped potential for this horse at 3 miles over fences. fences. He's a really nice jumper, he does it very nicely and has won plenty of races in his time as well, so he doesn't have that issue of maybe not going through with it. He's now gaining an awful lot of experience in bigger fields, and that should stand to him when it comes to big handicap chases this year over staying distances. The potential star in that yard is also trained by Trevor Hemmings, and it's a horse called Castle Russian. They were obviously so disappointed for the untimely death of Wetlands, who was a horse I absolutely adored and unfortunately fell at Ayr and wasn't being able to save. Castle Russian, on the other hand, has also been steadily progressive, and his efforts behind Pay the Piper, My Drogo and 300 through 5 all rate as really high bits of form, and I think this horse could well be nice. He won 2 starts earlier in the season when beating 5 Bar Brian and also winning a fairly uncompetitive race at Ayr after that. Going over fences, you'd have to assume this year, I think he should take decent rank and win plenty of novices chases up in the north. 2 to follow for Nicky Richards are both bumper scores, and one was 2 from 3 and one is 2 from 2. The one that's 2 from 3 is Nell's Son, who was able to quite impressively land a bumper under a penalty when beating the Stuart Crawford train to Arlo last time out. Previous to that, he'd beaten also an Irish Raider in Grozny, trained by Dennis Hogan, and even though that form doesn't maybe look too strong at this stage, he did that very impressively, and as I say, it's more of a task to go and win a bumper under a penalty than one would think, and that's what this horse has been able to do. You'd like to think he'll be able to now go over hurdles and win his fair share for owners that have had such great horses, including the likes of Simply Ned over the last number of years. He should be a good performer for this yard. As should the other horse that I'm thinking of, Sauce of Life, who's 2 from 2 in bumpers. Having won really impressively on debut, he managed to back it up with beating a really well-touted Olly Murphy horse at Market Raisin under a penalty. Olly Murphy has an excellent record at that track and he was well supported throughout the day, so the fact that this horse, Sauce of Life, was able to defy him, especially given him £7 as well, was a really good effort. This horse has got untapped potential over hurdles and untapped ability as well, considering we've only seen him twice and he's won impressively twice. That means that this horse could scale up to being a good handicapper or potentially a graded performer, and only time's going to tell with both those bumper horses for Nicky Richards just how well they could progress. He's the only British trainer for me on this video, but surely there will be more in the weeks to come. We really hope you have enjoyed this video, and of course if you have enjoyed this video, do give it a like and subscribe to the channel down below, and we'll be back very soon with more content, potentially looking forward at the Cheltenham Festival, the jumps cards in general, and hopefully a few more trainers to follow. We'll see you soon.